Let me start with a very big picture first. So first of all, where we start with our philosophy and how we approach all of our projects and all of our forms is we keep in mind that government's role is changing. Governments are expected to solve very, very complex problems. So they are not really a source of authority and power anymore, but they are more of a platform that has to outsource the intelligence and sort of smart solutions from the market and to channel them through government. Because the reality of the matter now is that governments do not know the best anymore. Markets know. In many situations, markets know much better. The question for the government is how to outsource that knowledge and intelligence from their populations, from markets, to be able to make the best decisions and how to be accountable, right? So the government's role fundamentally is changing in the 21st century, and the expectations towards governments are really, really huge. And that's why probably one of the reasons why the trust in governments is very low in the last decades, and also trust in systems, right? More than half of people within the OECD thinks that the system fails them. This is a huge number, and that's where we come from as well. Obviously, as you see, and as we all know, the new technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep data analysis and all that can lift and can help us drastically transform how we work. But the digital transformation is not as fast and as rapid as we would have expected, right? Essentially what we do that right now, many governments what do right now and is the situation with public procurement, what they do is they digitize more than really move to providing digital service and thriving in the digital sort of competitive markets, right? So let's say with the public procurement, we have public procurement law, we translate it into EGP, government procurement system, and then we hope that it will work better. But the behavior, the expectations of people change while the system itself lags behind. So that's where we come from, and that's the entry point. Now, with public procurement, okay, we know that for a fact that not many governments actually know how they spend their money. And it's around 15 to 20% of global GDP. It's a lot of money, but there is no government in the world currently that allows you to track tax dollars from budgeting all the way to invoicing, right? And there are many stages in between. And that's where we think we can help as well. Not many governments actually measure satisfaction and value for money in terms of like tangible, scientifically sound methodologies that can help you understand, do we procure well or our procurement could be better? Nobody knows exactly, but up to 30% of public procurement funds is wasted on corruption. Some people say, I would also call it inefficiencies, incompetences, incapacities to use technology in doing things better. So every third dollar of that percent of global GDP might be used better. Let's put it this mild way. European Parliament, we know, thinks that about €5 billion a year yearly are lost to corruption, and many governments that I have dealt with, well, most of them, lack about their capacity to really understand what's going on in their procurement. So lack of analysis, tools, and staff, right? And this is a big problem. Now, that means that we have about 20% of global GDP being spent something like that. So we kind of know what we're doing, we know where the money is traveling, but there are many questions that technology allows us to answer already, but we don't use that technology to the extent possible quite yet. Now, what is the solution? What we think open contracting can help with? And what is the key added value that we think or open contracting philosophy, let's say, can bring to the markets of public procurement? So first of all, we invite governments to publish open data about procurement. That's very simple. Many governments do it. Many governments do it very poorly in terms of scope, quality, and other speakers after me can testify to that fact as well. Now, publish open data to engage stakeholders into monitoring. Could you please mute yourself, those who don't speak? So publishing open data to engage stakeholders into monitoring, to improve policies, right? This is the value proposition of open contracting. We think that open data, standardized open data, stakeholder engagement can improve procurement. That's what we argue, and that's what we have seen happening in countries that actually do that. It can take many shapes. It can be a small-scale initiative, let's say in Ministry of Culture, or let's say Public Procurement Agency, or Courts of Audits, let's say, or it can be a large-scale procurement reform, such as in Ukraine, for instance, where they put open contracting at heart of their open contracting reform and drastically reform the whole system, right? But in either of those ways or models, let's say we have four key components. So first of all, we believe that publication of data is meaningless if you don't have a good design and people actually using that data. Of course, many people will tell you that. How we tackle that? We tackle that with a smart design. So we sit down with stakeholders, we say, what kind of data you want to use and for what purposes? And I will try to serve your needs together with the government. Only then, as point number two, we move to opening data and building technology tools, business intelligence tools, data analytics tools. BizPortal is actually a good example of that, of a business actually building, BI and also analysis tools based on procurement data. And then we move to step number three, which is monitoring and feedbacking. As we think that there has to be a platform, and we're convinced that there has to be a platform for people not only to consume data, but also to provide feedback to government, let's say a complaint mechanism, let's say a feedback channel, so that, as point number four, governments can learn about their policy shortcomings and improve that policy. Right? So those are four key steps. Now, at the core of what we do, and I'm not going to bother you too much about technology, but what we offer to many governments is so-called open contracting data standards. It's an open data schema, let's say a technical specification of what procurement data should be published, how, across 5 procurement stages, from planning to tender to award to contract and implementation. Within each of those sections, there's a list of data with a technical recommendation of how to publish. Now, up to 40 governments worldwide already use this as their publication and some collection way. Now, don't try to read this. This is only an example of what kind of analysis could be unlocked by each of those stages. So let's say if you as a government publish, let's say, contract data, all of a sudden you can do a contract analysis, see you can do a price analysis of how much government spends on different sort of items and things like that. So if the presentations are going to be shared with the audience, I encourage you to have a look just to understand what is the power of each of those stages and what you can unlock, especially linked to EU policy agendas such as single markets, cross-border procurement, and things like that. Now, let me summarize and let me conclude in terms of what open contracting brings, let's say, to the reality of public procurement. Now, red bubbles, at least on my screen, red bubbles represent a conventional understanding of e-government procurement system, where there is EGP system, and then contracting agencies interact with businesses through that system. Right, so government buys from businesses using EGP system. That is conventional, traditional system of how we understand e-procurement. Now, what we offer and what we think should be a fundamental element to that system is also a publication of open data, which is all the rest of the blue bubbles. A publication of open data that leads to business intelligence and analytics, that will lead to engagement of other agencies, businesses, media, and academics, that will, on the bottom, you see the bubble, produce feedback that will go all the way back to e-procurement policy, or to procurement policy, let's say, right? So red bubbles, traditional, conventional systems, the way we understand EGP, many governments understand it right now. And the blue bubbles is the additional that we see as a fundamental sort of brain element of the system. Now, why? The big question is why. There is already an academic evidence and we have better people in the panel today to speak about that, but very briefly, there is academic evidence that open data in procurement increases competition, increases supplier diversification, and therefore reduces prices. There are downfalls to it as well. More transparency puts a bit more pressure on government, so they tend to award contracts on low price criteria, which is a bit of an issue within the EU. There are issues, but as a general rule, we believe that more open data in procurement will lead to more competition and to better prices. Now, those are the potential impacts. In the interest of time, I will scan through just to say that those are not hypothetical ideas that we have. We have evidence showing that these things are real if you use open data in your procurement, but they include savings, increasing competition, as I said, and supplier diversification, better policies as a result of evidence and analytics, better feedback mechanisms, happier businesses, empowered small medium enterprises, increased integrity and corruption reduction, which we have seen in countries like Ukraine, which was unbelievable a couple of years ago. General interest growth from the population, change of sort of review mechanisms in public bodies and state-owned enterprises, and increasing quality of complaints in terms of their satisfaction. Now, very last point that I wanted to share is the vision for the European Union and open contracting. So the high-level vision we have is that European Union is now in a good position to create unified and standardized procurement data infrastructure across the countries. We can do it technically, and the policy momentum allows us to do it. Why? So that about 250,000 agencies that spend about 14% or 2 trillion euros across the EU can do it in a more efficient and accountable way, so that businesses can participate and watch procurement, and so that civil society organizations and academia can safeguard our tax euros. And that would hopefully lead to achieving more single market objectives, achieving public procurement strategy, especially strategic procurement, which is innovative, green, and socially responsible, and achieving digital agenda objectives. Now, what has to be done? Very quickly, just 5 quick points. First of all, DG Connect now has an opportunity to include procurement data into the list of high-value datasets under the Public Sector Information Directive. That would mean that each and every member state in the European Union would have to publish procurement data in open formats. And we will help DG Connect to think about it and to come to that point. DG Grow has to encourage countries to publish open data collected through new TED e-forms. Now, TED e-forms reform is going on, and we think that they have an opportunity to also attach publication elements to that. DG Regio has to promote the use of procurement data in monitoring cohesion spending, which is about 30% of the EU budget. Fourth, other DGs in EU bodies have to start using data for their own benefits. So courts of audits, for instance, could be one of those institutions. And lastly, countries have to align their policy goals with the ones above. If we do all that, the procurement market within the EU is going to look very, very different from the way it looks right now. So I'm going to skip this one, just to say that the open contracting as an idea is endorsed by the European Commission, by G7, G20, OECD, about more than 30 countries, as I said, now up to 40 already. There's a large ecosystem of digital social innovations and things like that, but I don't want to bother you. And a couple of very quick examples of how it's being done in other countries. So this is a quick dashboard from our friends in the Washington, DC, that helps you use open contracting data standard for corruption risk detection. This is, you probably know, a very simple and straightforward redflags.eu tool from Hungary. This is a new project, Tenders Guru, that will analyze procurement data from red flagging perspective as well. So maybe a collaboration opportunity for you as well. And one thing that I wanted to mention is the example from Ukraine, where these kind of tools and data-driven artificial intelligence-powered monitoring is now owned and operated by government, is part of their legal obligation to do it. and is producing results that are very promising. I'm happy to share with you privately if you would like to hear about any of those. So those are the key messages I wanted to share. In the slide deck that's going to be shared with you, you're going to see how open contracting partnership, we specifically can help you with technology, with engagement, with better policies. We have a number of resources within each of those stages. But yeah, I'm going to leave you with a message that the future is bright, and we hope to contribute to that future, which is open. So hopefully that was useful.
Thank you very much, Karolis. Yes, it was very interesting and useful. And I will use the opportunity to open a short Q&A session now, and to use the opportunity to ask you first question. I know that you already have several talks with the EU, with the European Commission, about recommending or strongly recommending the implementation of OCP standards for all the EU member states. Could you give some insights for what's the situation, and whether the Commission even think about this as part of its efforts to develop a better rule of law mechanism in the forthcoming programming period?
Yes, thank you, Todor. That's very important. I think just to understand the policy agenda of the European Commission, that's probably the most powerful player in all of our agendas now. So I would not push Commission to be in a position to impose anything on member states. Okay, what's happening in reality right now is that about 10, 12 countries within the European Union are implementing open contracting data standards. So standards arising from below. Now, having said that, Commission has to provide some clarity in terms of what is the minimum expectation of publication, which they do with 2014 directive, but they are not in a position to recommend specific standards. And that is why we thought that DG Connect is the best position to actually say that each and every member state has to publish procurement data in open format. And then member states will have to decide for themselves what are these formats. And that's obviously going to be an opening for us that we're going to use with open contracting data standard. Now, in terms of timing, DG Connect is currently conducting a study on impact assessments of high-value data sets, and procurement will be included into that impact assessment. So the chances are that it's going to be, by the end of the year, it's going to be a recommendation already, and next year or in the next 2 years, we believe we have a good case for including procurement into the list. So my guess is that year, maximum 2 years, and we'll see procurement as open data mandatory data set in the EU with the Public Sector Information Directive.